welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on our authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Welcome, book lovers. My name is Luthie West. I am the author of Spirit Dancer, The Blade of Parisi. And I'm here today to talk with Joab Stieglitz about his intriguing pulp adventure novel, The Old Man's Request. I'd like to thank Reader's Magnet for presenting this opportunity for us to bring you our authors and their books. And there's Joab here. Let me see, our author of the hour. And we will be answering readers' questions and our viewers' questions. Please put them in the chat. And the last half of the hour, we will address your questions to Joab. Joab, author of The Old Man's Request. And that's book one in his Utgard series. He is a software applications consultant in Alexandria, Virginia, and also a tabletop role-playing game player and game master. Welcome, Joab. Good to see you here.
Nice to be here.
Before we begin, you have designated this as a pulp fiction, sort of an H.P. Lovecraftian type of writing. Would you please tell us, take a moment to tell us what pulp fiction is and about your book setting? Mm-hmm.
I call my book Supernatural Pulp Adventure, in that they are designed as pure entertainment. There's no hidden messages or anything like that in them. There's no great message or statement or whatever. The term pulp or pulp fiction, unlike the movie that most people think of, pulp fiction refers to serialized stories in magazines that were popular in the late 19th and early 20th century. Magazines like Argosy and Weird Tales, Fantastic Adventures, True Detective Stories, things like that. Those magazines were published en masse for an increasing readership. The reason for that was because as technology improved and the world got smaller and people became more literate, they were looking for adventure, essentially.
Wonderful.
They're called.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They're called pulp magazines because of the cheap paper they were printed on. I mean, the stories were literally a dime a dozen. The magazines generally cost about 10 cents, and the authors were paid, I believe it was by the page. So they weren't paid a lot, but it was a great way to get into the market, so to speak. And a lot of famous authors like H.P. Lovecraft, Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho, Robert E. Howard, Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, all of those folks got started writing for pulp magazines.
Cool.
And the magazines themselves have kind of died out, but the genre still exists. And these days, we have a new pulp wave going in where people are picking up these characters from those old magazines and writing new stories about them.
I understand that Old Man's Request is the first of a trilogy. Well, how long have you been writing, and how many books have you published to date?
Well, I've been writing for a very long time. I started writing as a kid, but I didn't really seriously start writing until the 90s, when I started writing a Tolkien-esque journey tale, journey through unknown places with different characters and species and races and things. And I wrote that in bits and pieces. I wrote about a quarter of it up front, actually intending to be a short story. But then I added on to it a few years later. And then I wrote dribs and drabs here and there. And then another big chunk while waiting to get laid off from a job. That was around 2000. And in the end, I had 300 pages of changing characters, changing story, changing genre even. And it was no good. It was worthless. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't have any coherent plot. So I put it aside. And then in the about 2015 or so, a friend of mine named Steve Russell, who was a publisher of gaming materials for Wright Publishing, he was actually game mastering a Pathfinder game of ours, playtesting it for his company. And he heard about my stories, and he really encouraged me and pushed me to write them down and publish them. And he connected me with the artist who did my covers. And the rest is history. It took about 9 months to write from start to publish of The Old Man's Request. Unfortunately, Steve was killed in a car accident, so he never got to see the result.
Oh, that's too bad. So what or who first inspired you to write?
Well, I've always been an imaginative person. I played role-playing games since I was in 7th grade. And, I started writing adventures for the games. And then, with the games and the characters, you start writing backstories. Where did my character come from? What makes them tick? And then, you stick a couple of them together and they have an adventure and it makes a story. So,
yeah. So evidently the game, being a role-playing gamer and game master, sort of helped you get into the writing. So what specifically was the inspiration for The Old Man's Request?
Well, one of the games that I like to play is called Call of Cthulhu, which is based on the writings of H.P. Lovecraft and his circle. Mm-hmm. And I ran a game of that for several years, actually, which is unusual because the main mechanic of Call of Cthulhu is to solve the problem before you go insane or die. It's not uncommon for players to have multiple characters. But this particular game ended up running for about 3 years, and it had 8 players. And I took copious notes, which are actually right here. Fat binder of notes from the various game sessions. And I pulled that out when Steve started pushing me. And I trimmed it down to 3 characters and one particular story, and that evolved into The Old Man's Request. The Missing Medium was partially based on gaming and partially brand new. And then the third book, The Other Realm, is completely new, unrelated to the games at all.
You know, I was particularly intrigued with the inclusion of some with some Latin phrasing that you have in The Old Man's Request. How long did it take you actually to complete that novel?
As I said, from outline to publication was about 9 months. But all 3 of those books, and that's The Old Man's Request, The Missing Medium, and The Other Realm, all 3 of those books, if they were published in the last century, it feels weird saying that, but if they were published in the last century, they may have all been published, as one fat book. But these days they want a series, so I split them into a series. But I had the plot for all 3 of them in mind when I started. So The Old Man's Request, like I said, took about 9 months to write. And then Missing Medium about the same. And then The Other Realm took a little bit longer. I don't quite remember why. I think it's because it was the end of the series and I had to tie everything together.
Yes, of course. What do you enjoy most about writing?
About writing? Well, I write the stories for entertainment. I enjoy coming up with them, making the characters develop, putting them in situations and getting them out of them. A lot of my writing is organic in that, I set up a situation like the gaming. I set up the situation, but I don't know what the characters are going to do necessarily in advance. So I get to see where they go as well. But of course, the ultimate goal of writing something is for someone to read and enjoy it.
Right, absolutely. Actually, that's kind of the reason why I write. Just is for the entertainment, is to take somebody and bring them into this particular world with these particular characters.
And writing for me, one qualm I have about role-playing games is I never get to actually play. I'm always the game master. So in writing the books, I get to say what the characters do.
Yeah,
kind of like role-playing by myself.
Yeah, could you actually take us a little bit through your writing process? What it is that how you come up with the story and then how you develop it and that sort of thing.
Sure. I'll give you a synopsis from a different book, from The Hunter in the Shadows. At the end of that's book number 4, which would come after the first 3, obviously, the first trilogy. And in that book, it starts with Anna having a dream where she's chasing somebody through the jungle. She doesn't know why she is. She's chasing this guy who is a German through the jungle, and she comes across a Mesoamerican ruin. And and she has a vision there. And she meets a British archaeologist. And the German has them cornered, and to escape, they jump into the top of a pyramid, which is bottomless. And she wakes up. Mm-hmm. Then she discovers that a British archaeologist from Mesoamerica has contacted her boss to arrange a meeting. And this person is a person from her dream.
And so the dream comes true.
So the dream comes true and gets even better because the archaeologist is actually inhabited by a time-traveling alien who is contacting Anna to prevent the German from meeting another alien in Boston.
Okay, we don't want too many spoilers because
Yeah.
we want to be able to buy the book and find out for ourselves. Is there a particular time of day that you like to write, or?
Well, it's funny. I write if I sit down to write, it's usually in the evening because that's when I have free time. But a lot of times, ideas come to me during the day. I work from home, so my work machine is right over there, and a lot of times, an idea comes to me or a chapter comes to me, and I'll just take a break and write it down right here on this very same laptop. But it was weird because when COVID hit and the work kind of slowed down, I found it harder to write. I could make time when I was busy. When I wasn't busy, I felt guilty about writing on company time. Go
interesting. That's interesting.
I use a tool called Scrivener, which also has a iPhone version.
Me too.
I love Scrivener. It keeps everything organized.
Mm-hmm.
And, it just flows, as I said.
Mm-hmm. What are you currently working on?
I have a couple of things going right now. The third book in the second trilogy, which currently doesn't have a title yet, I just finished writing that last week, and it's currently with an editor looking for any issues with it. I hope to publish that one before the end of the year, and that will complete the second trilogy, the Thule trilogy, which consists of The Hunter in the Shadows and The Worlds I Know, and the third book, of course, which doesn't have a title yet, but does have a cover that I won't show you.
Okay.
But I've got a cover for it, but I don't have a title for it yet. Or I have the cover art, not the
Cover
titles.
art. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that's one thing. That's the next piece going out. And then I have a couple other things in mind. One is a detective, a series of murder mysteries set in a modern version of H.P. Lovecraft's Dreamlands. The Dreamlands, of course, are the place where dreamers go and have fantastic adventures with all kinds of weird creatures and things. But in Lovecraft's universe, it was, fantasy based.
Right.
Yeah. So I thought, well, what if that universe, that world, was modernized, with cities and cars and stuff like that. And I'll have a detective investigate crimes in that setting. And then as an added bonus, the aliens are in control, and they're like a totalitarian society, and our hero is a policeman, and therefore a member of that government who does morally questionable things for the will of the overlords, as we say. However, I haven't completely worked that out yet. I need his motivations and his foibles and all that stuff. I need to work on all that stuff. But that is what's coming next. And then I mentioned earlier that the new pulp movement is working on writing stories for characters from the old pulp magazines. And a publisher recently put out a call for proposals for some characters that have not been published since the magazines.
Oh.
And and I'm thinking about doing some stories for one of those.
Wonderful. Speaking of characters, I know you mentioned Anna, and in the fourth book, would you tell us something about the characters that you have in your trilogy and how they flow from one to the other?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, it started with a game. And Anna Rykov was actually my now wife's character in that game. She is a Russian-American archaeologist. And she was married off when she was a teenager to enable her family to emigrate to the United States. She was married to a wealthy immigrant, an elderly wealthy Russian who died a couple years after their marriage and left her with a modest fortune. So she wanted to be American, when you've seen as American, though she does speak with an accent. So, she went to Columbia, she got a PhD in archaeology, and discovered that women professionals who could be Bolsheviks are not very welcome. So she gets accepted a post by an aging trustee of the small college, and she accepts. This same trustee also hired a doctor named Harold Lamb, another Friends character. And Lamb was I guess the resident at the university hospital who was teaching, basic anatomy or whatever, as well as Sean O'Malley, yet another Friends character, who was a priest and also teaching at the university. And the three of them, the academic, the scientist, and the priest, become friends, and the adventures revolve around the three of them. Over time, it seemed to focus more toward Anna, and my readers tend to really, latch on to Anna. So the further along the books went, the more she became in the spotlight, and the other two aren't even in the second trilogy.
Have you ever had a reaction from a reader about maybe you've killed a favorite character or something in one of your books?
Well, in the first book, there is a detective. I don't want to give too much away. Who's a bit odd.
Okay.
Who comes to a unusual end.
Okay. All right. We're getting ready for questions from the readers. Before we do that, I would like everyone who is those who are with us viewing here to know that they can get their copy of The Old Man's Request through Joab's website. That's joabstieglitzbooks.com, or through Amazon and other online retailers. Also, let's see, we don't have questions just yet. They're going to be gathering them for me pretty soon here. I wanted to let me see, go back just a moment to the Latin phrases I was referring to that you have in there. I would like you to tell us, before we go on with other questions, to a little bit of how you developed that particular thing. I have a Rekinder language that I invented for my epic fantasy. So I'm quite interested in languages personally, and I'd like to know about this Latin inclusion.
Well, as I mentioned, one character was a priest, Catholic priest, so of course he's going to have Latin. And actually, the player who played him had at one time gone to the seminary. So his character was part of his background was training with the Vatican's authority on exorcism. So I went online and I looked up, what is the prayer for exorcism?
Mm,
And that's what's in the book.
cool.
And then there's another one there, which is for summoning alien beings. And that one I kind of mixed a little Latin with some other stuff to make it sound menacing and ancient.
Yeah. And also a little bit about the time period, because you're talking about the 1920s.
Oh, yeah. So the 1920s are known as the Roaring 20s because a lot of things changed then. After World War One,
Mhm.
the United States said, we don't want to get involved in world affairs, and became very isolationist. But at the same time, people were becoming more literate. Cars and trains and airplanes made the world seem smaller, but most people never moved beyond maybe 50 miles from where they were born. The world was still very small in reality for a lot of people. So as a result of World War One and rebuilding Europe, it was a time of economic prosperity in the United States, as well as the period of prohibition when alcohol sales were illegal, but happened anyway. But
Yeah.
this
Indeed.
isolation and such generated romantic feelings toward the rest of the world. The notion of other places, primitive cultures, Africa, ancient Egypt, Aztec, Mexico, the Orient. All these places are exotic to people who've never lived, who've never moved beyond the farm. So,
And they still are.
and they still are. Yeah, they are still exotic.
Yeah.
But as a consequence, or as a result, I should say, people started imitating the fashions with Egyptian-esque garments and the heavy eye makeup and short hair and turbans and things. People started emulating the rest of the world, and they wanted experiences with those cultures, and that popped out in the pulp magazines. At the same time, a lot of new things were introduced in the United States, like Chinese food. Though what we know of Chinese food actually came from San Francisco, but that's a new thing. Change and modernization, women working, women wearing men's clothing, kind of thing. Of course, all men wore hats back then too, but those are all aspects of the setting for my books. So Anna wants to be a modern 20s woman. So she is working. She is seeking adventure. She is, she's studying archaeology, ancient civilizations, kind of grabs all those things.
Did you study archaeology?
I actually discovered anthropology in my senior year of college. Had I discovered it sooner, I may have majored in it. But I did start a master's degree in anthropology, cultural anthropology, ethnography in particular. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't get past the weed out course. It's the one where you write a paper every week, and if you got it wrong, you rewrote the paper. And at the end of the semester, I had 13 papers to write. So it's called human ecology, and I still don't understand what happens there. But I had started anthropology, and I was interested in anthropology, and I've always been interested in other cultures. I ended up being a German major in college.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Wow, wonderful. Again, for anyone who is out there watching us live, you can be watching us live on Facebook and YouTube. Please put your questions down below. And if you are here at the Festival of Storytellers site right now, please place your questions in the chat box so that we will address them pretty soon here. And have in this second section, second, easy for me to say, second section of the session right now, that we can have Joab answer your personal questions. And yeah, tell us what you're thinking. You can give us your comments as well. We would like to hear those things.
This forum is for you, viewer. You know, we authors, hide in our little rooms and write things, but talking with you and getting your thoughts and opinions and responses is, why we're here. This is what we're after. We want to hear from you.
Yes, it's true. Being an author is a solitary occupation, and we are often with our own thoughts and with our characters that we create, as well as characters that we read about. We often read in the same genre that we write in. Which, by the way, what might you be reading right now, Joab?
Well, right now I'm actually reading some of those. I put it away. Some of the pulp stories. I have to confess, I do a lot of audiobooks, but I'm listening to a lot of pulp stories that have been recorded. I'm also a fan of historical fiction. Philip Kerr's Bernie Gunther character is a favorite of mine. He's a police detective in Germany in the 20s and 30s. Of course, in the 20s, Germany was a democracy. In the 30s, it was under the Nazi regime, and the Nazis absorbed the police into their organization, and the consequences were significant. I enjoy those books. I also enjoy fantasy novels.
We have a question from Frank. He says, first, I checked your blog, and I'm really hoping you still are able to come up with some good stories, something related to the pandemic, end of the world thing, probably. But what he wants to know is, Joab, where do you get these great ideas?
Some of them come from games. Some of them come from, they just pop in my head. Some of them are, little bits and pieces that have gathered over the years. Everyone asks me, what's the one thing you would advise a new author? And that is to write all the time. Write whenever you can, and write it down. Don't just think about it. Write it down on paper or on the screen or whatever, and keep it. And those things merge together at some point and become a seed for a story. You don't have to write sentences. You don't have to write paragraphs or whole stories at one time. Just write little bits. So I think I have on my phone here. I took a trip to India. It was before the pandemic. And while I was there, I made some notes for a book, an upcoming book, which ended up being the third book. And I don't have them anymore. So, but I wrote down, green striped tiger and, ancient gods. I forget exactly what I had there, but, I wrote them down on my trip. I'm here taking pictures of tigers and noting things for an upcoming book. Just whatever. So whatever comes to mind, write it down, and hopefully some of it will become an idea,
right?
A germ,
right.
A seed.
Yeah.
And I have brown thumbs, so those seeds don't always grow.
What is we have a collective story question, so there are probably several people who have asked, what was the most challenging experience you've had while writing your books?
The most challenging part of writing the books is the end. I mean, a lot of times, well, there's two parts of that. A lot of times I've got the story going and I know how I want it to end. I just need to get there. You know, that last little bit, that was what was holding me up on book number 6 here. But yeah, because especially when you're ending the trilogy, because then, you know, you need to tie everything together. That was really the challenge. I mean, you want to have a good idea of what your characters are, you know, their background, their motivations, and you want to have a clear picture of, you know, different locations and things, and you want to know what the plot is, though the plot often changes as you go along. But the most difficult part is finishing, to be honest. A lot of people, me included, start lots of things and just don't finish them. You know, you just either run out of interest or you run out of time, or you know, whatever reason, you just don't finish them. So the hardest part is saying you're done and saying you're done. You know, you're saying, well, is it finished now or should I add some more? You know, if you're thinking, should I add some more, think another book.
I have an experience that I know the other authors share, and that is when characters hijack the story and they start going. Can you address that a little bit?
I can. I mentioned that Tolkien-esque journey tale I had started, and that one actually had a premise, the idea that nobody's good or bad, they're all doing what they think is right, for possibly conflicting reasons. But the big thing there, and actually it wasn't a character per se that took over, but the big thing there was I had lots of different factions, all of whom were represented with a stereotypical accent. And originally my protagonists met one group at a time, but eventually they all came together and they're having conversations, and the accents took over. You know, make sure that this one's saying the right word and that one, oh, those two, when you write those accents next to each other, they look almost the same. And the accent took over the story. And it was all about making sure that people were, it was more difficult to make sure they were speaking correctly than, you know, writing the story. Writing the story actually ended up becoming secondary. That's part of the reason I stopped writing it. And also the reason that I don't use accents.
Tell us, is The Old Man's Request available on Audible?
Yes, in fact, all 3 of the Edgardo series.
Wonderful.
The Old Man's Request, The Missing Medium, and The Other Realm. All 3 of those are available on Audible. They were read by a voice actor named Bolton Marsh, who did an amazing job with them. When I heard them for the first time, I was overwhelmed because, you know, they sounded like the books I'm paying for. You know, and
That's
books
wonderful.
I pay a lot more for than I charge. But they sound amazing. They did an awesome job.
Until as we get more questions, I will bring in and read them. But right now, I would like to know a little more about yourself. What do you like to do when you're not writing?
Well, when I'm not writing, I watch a lot of TV. I watch a lot of Netflix, to be specific, Netflix and Amazon. But I also play role-playing games. I play them online a couple times a week. I run a game here in my house once a week. And I play in a game at someone else's house. They're not all weekly. Some of them are interrupted by people's schedules and such. I also have 2 dogs that I walk. One of them is getting old, so she takes a little bit longer. I have a loving wife, of course, who I of course spend my time with, go to movies, but most of the time is either gaming or television.
Yeah, you mentioned your wife was part of your gaming group,
Yes,
so she enjoys it too.
she enjoys it too. That's part of how we met, actually. And Anna Rykov was her character in the game, and she's also written a couple books that my Rantings of a Wandering Mind has published. One of them is a science fiction story about a space marine's return to civilian life, which is really good, I have to say. And the other one is a collection of short stories about a college student's introduction to the Cthulhu cult by a practitioner friend, which are pretty good too.
Yeah. Well, you asked, you mentioned, that she does writing, you do, and I have read quite a bit of the old man's request, and I have to say that I am impressed. You're a very good writer. I enjoy good writing, and I would like you to talk a little bit about what an author needs to do. I mean, you have an editor that you send your books to once they are completed, and publisher or self-publish.
There's a lot of folks out there looking to help you, and you don't need all of them. I mean, you can hire a developmental editor who will take your initial idea and offer suggestions on how to improve it. I haven't used one of those.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your copy editors who will go through your document and take out the typos and spelling errors and things like that. I use a software product called
Grammarly?
Not Grammarly, the other one.
The other one.
Pro Writing. I don't remember what it's called now. I use another tool which did a great job. Actually, I hadn't used that tool until this most recent book, and it found all that stuff. Incomplete sentences, missing conjunctions, missing words, because you always forget that of and off, and sometimes the spell checker doesn't find it's a legitimate word but not the word you meant, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of electronic tools out there to help you with that. What I use is a proofreader. That's the person who reads the final version of the book and comments on whether they think it's complete, makes sense, is consistent, follows the story, etc. And that's where book number 6 is now. Now, the first, all the other books, all of my other books, I should say, went to one editor, but he couldn't get to my book until the last week in December. So this time I'm going with a different editor, and we'll see how that goes. Of course, that editor hasn't read the first 5 books, so we'll see. I don't know.
Well, a lot of times the books will, even in a trilogy or a series, the books will stand on their own, and sometimes they're very connected. So, are you saying then that your last books are very connected, so that
both of my trilogies are kind of like the original Star Wars. The first book stands by itself. The second book says we'll see you in book 3. And I inadvertently did that with both trilogies. First book is standalone. The next 2 books are linked. And of course, the second trilogy references bits of the first trilogy, but you don't necessarily have to read it first.
Right. Oh, that's good. I want to ask a little bit about I'm sorry, I forgot it. The Wandering Mind. What's the name of that?
Rantings of a Wandering Mind.
Ragings of a Wandering Mind. This is your imprint.
Yeah. Rantings of a Wandering Mind was originally the name of my blog, and that became my imprint when I created. When I when I wanted to have an imprint to identify my books. And I have Rantings of the Wandering Mind, LLC is the company that I publish under. And I have a newsletter called Joab's Regular Rant. In fact, if you go to my website, joabstieglitz.com, there's a box where you can subscribe to the rant, and that will give you a link to some short stories I've written that you can download.
And that's different than joabstieglitzbooks.com.
Correct.
Yes, okay. From Fairgoer 1552 wants to know if you can imagine any actors playing or which actors you might like to play certain characters. If it should ever be produced as a movie, who would these actors be?
And I was actually asked that once before, and it was hard because I'm not a Hollywood gossip person, and my images of actors are probably dated. I'm seeing them probably in the 80s and 90s. I'm 56 now, so I don't know a lot of these younger actors.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see, if you bear with me, I could see Anna played by. If these people were younger, I could see Anna played by Rachel Weisz. She seems like a very similar person. Or what's her name? Oh, I forgot her name. She was in Grosse Pointe Blank. Minnie Driver. Minnie Driver would fit the Anna role pretty well. Mm-hmm. For Father O'Malley, I could see Thomas Jane, who was in The Expanse as Detective Miller. He seems like a good fit for that character. And for Dr. Lamb, I don't really have anybody in mind for him. He's a big guy, a very he's a big guy from a wealthy family. So he's very neat and clean, and mm-hmm. he's a true scientist. And I don't really have anybody in mind for him.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much. Let's see. What other things would be of interest? Need to talk about, I wanted to talk a little more about, because you mentioned your blog and you said short stories. Are these would these be like pulp fiction type of short stories, or are they different in the way that you've presented them on your blog?
Yeah, they're pulpish. One I was actually asked to write about. It was actually a tie-in for a range of miniatures for for Venus 1887, which is was going to be a tabletop miniatures game set on Venus, which of course is the planet inhabited by dinosaurs and Edgar Rice Burroughs type things, except for whatever reason, only women can survive there. Men go insane. And the means of propulsion is instantaneous, discovered by accident. This was all given to me. So I wrote a story about the luckiest woman in the world, who is a princess of Liechtenstein, who has adventures inadvertently on Venus.
Yeah.
And that one is very, like I said, Edgar Rice Burroughs. There's dinosaurs. There's, bayonets and soldiers and such. Another one I wrote is called Sucker Punch. Sucker Punch is about the heir to the Scotch tape fortune, who has a bunch of friends around him who investigate weird happenings. And the Sucker Punch comes from One of his hangers-on is a former bare knuckle boxer who punches a monster and it doesn't go down. So he's all put out about why didn't it knock the monster down. So that's where the title came from. And then the last one is called Operation Jinx, which is set in World War II with undercover agents in Nazi Czechoslovakia, which has wartime elements to it as well as a supernatural turn.
Cool. Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, I want to encourage our live viewers to get their questions and comments in. This sort of a last call. We're winding down just a little bit here in the last 9 minutes. And want to also reiterate that the Old Man's Request, as well as the trilogy and yes, the Old Man's Request, the whole trilogy and his other books are available at joabstieglitzbooks.com. That's joabstieglitzbooks.com. And on Amazon and other online retailers. We have also just talked about his blog that is on joabstieglitz.com, where you can read some of his short stories and find out more about Joab Stieglitz himself. We want to thank all of our viewers, and whether you're viewing live on Facebook, YouTube, or here on the Festival of Storytellers website, for coming, because this is why we write. We write for our readers, and we write to entertain you and for other reasons. Authors all have their own reasons, but we love our readers, and we encourage our readers to get our books and enjoy themselves, relax with a good book. And let's see, what else do we want to discuss? We have a few minutes. We do have a few minutes, and because we want to know where we can find you, would you also tell us where you are on social media as well as your website?
Sure. I am on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, all as Joab Stieglitz. There's also a Rantings of the Wandering Mind page on Facebook. Additionally, I've got my website, joabstieglitz.com, the e-commerce site, joabstieglitzbooks.com. Yeah, I'm also going to be at PhilCon, the Philadelphia Science Fiction Association convention next weekend, the 19th through the 21st. And next month, I'll be at the World Science Fiction Convention, WorldCon, in Washington, D.C. In the middle of, I think it's the 15th through the 18th of December, if you want to come and see me.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Okay, follow him on social media. Thank our audience for participation. We have 6 minutes to fill. 5 minutes remaining.
I do have a Facebook page.
Yes, Frank, he mentioned the Facebook page, Rantings of a Wandering Mind. Rantings of a Wandering Mind. I'm going to get that correct before we get done here. Rantings of a Wandering Mind. Wonderful Facebook page. Rantings of a Wandering Mind. And in the last few minutes here, there was there was a story you told me about these lovely covers that you have for your books,
Oh,
and
yeah.
the fellow who did those.
Yeah. I mentioned that Steve Russell connected me with an artist that he uses for his game books, or used for his games books. And he did this cover. Actually, he did that cover. And I really liked it, so I got him to do the second book. He did this one, and the third book, he did that one. And I actually commissioned him to do the fourth cover, and he disappeared.
Hmm.
You know, he gave me a draft of the fourth cover, but no one has heard from him since. So I had to go with someone else for the next few.
Yeah, that's quite a story.
Which among those books do you
Books
like?
do you like the most? Yes. Which among those books do you like the most?
It's like saying who's your favorite child.
Yeah, that's right. He recognizes that. Yeah, he just mentioned. Yeah, it's like your children.
I would say it is hard to say. And as I mentioned, the three of them at one time probably would have been published as a single book, but we always have favorites.
Yes.
You know, it's hard to say. The one that I guess the one that sticks out most for me is The Other Realm. This one was a departure from my previous direction. That one's more fantasy than horror.
Can you give us just a couple minutes of what it's about without being too big of a spoiler for us? Oh, he also asked, do you see yourself in the stories too?
Do I see? Well, they mentioned I was a game master, so I'm all the characters who aren't the protagonists. But I don't see myself in these stories, though I do see myself in the new ones that I'm writing.
Oh.
The murder mysteries, not as the victim. But well, just to recap the trilogy. In the first book, you have the old man's request. The three of them address the old man's issue. The second book, they go in search of a missing spiritualist, a missing medium.
Mm-hmm.
And they locate, or they identify where the medium is, and to rescue him, or retrieve him, I should say, Anna and Dr. Lamb actually travel into the realm of the mystic's own imagination, where Anna must rescue both him and herself. That's The Other Realm.
Cool.
The Other Realm also features a big, dumb barbarian who always speaks in all caps and talks in third person.
Yes. Okay. I'm
wondering what really
is the old man's request. What was his request?
Well, his request was to address this indiscretion from his youth that cost one man his head, literally, and there he is, and the other one his mind. And
intriguing.
They summoned something, and he wants our protagonists to banish it. That's the request. Cool.
Nice request. We are with Reader's Magnet and the Festival of Storytellers. Thank you for joining us. We are not authors without our readers. Otherwise, we would just be journaling to ourselves. And so we appreciate
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, nothing wrong with it. But this is what we write for. We're glad that you're here and you're meeting with us. And we have I'm Lucy West, and I'm here with Joab Stieglitz today. And you can get a hold of Joab Stieglitz. You can find out more about him and more about his books at his website, joabstieglitzbooks.com for his books, and you can order there as well as on Amazon and other online retailers. Also, joabstieglitz.com to read his blog and short stories. I thank Reader's Magnet and the Festival of Storytellers for the presenting this opportunity to us and to all of our authors. And we want to know that authors can depend on Reader's Magnet. We share your stories with the world. And is there anyone you want to thank, Joab, before we close it up?
Oh, well, I'd like to thank Reader's Magnet for providing this forum. You know, it's in the COVID world, it's hard to get out and meet people. And that's one thing I really miss, actually. Thankfully, things are starting to open up again. But I know I'm indebted to my wife for pushing me, especially with book number 6. She said, you need new stuff. You need new stuff. You can't go out again until you have new stuff. And yeah. And you, Lucy, for this interview.
You're welcome. Thank you. It was great fun. I enjoyed our discussion.
As did I.
Thank you. Okay, I have to